So Zera Shimshon in Parshas Chayei, page Reish Chav Zayin on the left side, that's Gimel. Here to explain, Pasuk, the verse, Vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sara v'livkosa. That Avraham came to eulogize for Sara and to cry for her. And everyone asks this question. The Techila Adam Bocha. First the person cries, Al Meso, for someone who passed. L'sof maspido, and then comes the eulogy. The Gimel lebechi v'zayin lehesped, as the Gemara tells us that the first 3 days you're just supposed to cry, and it's over the 7 days, meaning really over the next 4 days, that the person eulogizes. V'od, and another question. Lama yesh chaf zeira b'milas v'livkosa. Why is there a small chaf in the word v'livkosa to cry for her? Which the commentaries say because she lived a good life and all of that, but he wants to give a deeper explanation to this. And in this process, he's going to share with us the secrets of what really happens at a levaya. And I want to give an introduction to this, that many of us really miss the point. You go to many levayas, and you see the family just doesn't get it. And you can't blame anyone because they've just experienced the loss. And it's not just the family, sometimes it's the friends too who speak. And they don't understand what the goal of what they're up there to accomplish is. And that's something which we really should know better, because this is part of the cycle of life, and this is something which... And the truth is, every time you get up to speak, you're supposed to ask yourself, what is the goal? What am I trying to accomplish? What's the message I'm trying to get across? In what way am I trying to influence the people that I'm speaking to? And that same question should be asked by every life cycle event. This question should be asked by a bris, by a sheva brachos. What are you trying to accomplish? So what are you trying to accomplish with a eulogy? So he says, V'yuvan, so this can be explained. V'mashakasav bal sefer mavar yabok. There's a sefer called Mavar Yabok, which includes within it all the secrets of what happens during this process. V'zel Shona, these are his words. V'hahesped lemeis hu to'eles gadol. A eulogy for someone who has departed is a great benefit for the person who departed. Ki al yidei ademos, because through the tears that people cry at the levaya, yiftechu lemeis sharei dima ha'elyonim, it opens for the deceased the gates of tears above. There are many doorways to heaven. One of those doorways is the doorway of tears. And when someone cries for someone who passed away, that lubricates the gates of the entrance of tears up above. Hamasulakim min adin, and the gates of tears, there's no judgment.
There's at least one Gemara that says, with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, all the gates were closed except the gate of tears.
That's right. Because the gate of tears, now exactly what does that particular gate lead to? It's unclear. We don't understand all these things exactly. We have to see more in the Sefer Mavar Yabok, where he goes through all these things. But yeah, that's exactly what it's referring to. That Gemara about the gate of tears. And some of that's an entrance to heaven, which doesn't require the same type of scrutiny and examination as do the other doors. Ka'amram, as he says, Sharei Dima lo ninalu, the gates of tears are never closed. Okay, so what does that mean? So what does that mean that then we should all just cry and then that person gets a free pass? Is that how it works? No. Amnam tzarich sheyeh habechi leto'eles hanefesh. It has to be spiritual crying. Lo leto'eles hachomer, not for the sake of the physical, not a physical crying. It's interesting because the rabbi was speaking yesterday, and he said that many people who cry over the loss of the potato kugel recipe, which is now gone from the family. But that's not what we're missing. What we're missing is that person's spiritual influence, the love that they provided, the care. And that's where the focus needs to be, the spiritual accomplishments that that person would have been able to do had they remained in the world. That's what the crying is about. And when the crying is for a good reason, those tears open certain gates of heaven for that person. It's a completely different image. I mean, that you should not hold back tears at a levaya. Let them flow, and it'll be for the benefit of the person who left the world. So, ukdei lirmos, so the Torah wants to tell us, shehabechi shelo, that Avram's crying, haya letoelas hanefesh, was for the benefit of the soul, v'lo letoelas hachomer, not for the physical. Hiniach hakaf zeira, that's why there's a small chaf. Loma shemiat bivchiyaso, he diminished his crying, or as they say, he restricted his crying. Shlobacha klapi hachomer, that he didn't miss his wife, or didn't cry for her because of the physical. Ela machmas hesped, but he was eulogizing to elas hanefesh, for the sake of the soul. So first, he eulogized her. He eulogized her, meaning he tried to understand who she was from a spiritual perspective. And then the crying was for that, not for. And therefore, there are people who get up and they feel that a levaya, sometimes you feel like people feel that pressure of the public speaking, and so it becomes a professionally read essay on something that the person wants to say, or they feel they have to make jokes to entertain people. The purpose of the hesped is to be raw and difficult and tearful and inspire people to cry for the loss of the spiritual aspect that is now gone.
So, but wasn't she a great spiritual loss
Yes.
to the world? So why did he only cry a little?
No, he didn't cry a little. He controlled the crying to make it only about the spiritual and not about the physical. Because he missed her physically as well. He missed Sara's potato kugel also. But he had to focus in and limit. It's not about less crying, but about focused crying.
Rabbi Worch, here's what I learned from Chayei and Zera. He said the reason he did not cry publicly, especially a few days, because he said whatever Hashem gives you is for good, right? If he cried, right, he will take, he says, when Hashem took my wife, it's bad. And that's the reason he controlled his cry and his emotion.
Oh, that's a different explanation. That explanation actually says that Avraham cried less because he wanted to show that he accepts the judgment.
Right.
Right, but he's saying that Avram's controlled the crying rather than cried less, or focused the crying towards the spiritual. Yeah.
So the Chaf signifies that it was a spiritual cry, focusing on the spiritual.
He's saying that it was the control and the restriction. It was the emphasizing and the moving away and focusing of the crying towards one thing that made it a smaller image of that chaf.
So why that particular letter versus
That's a good question. Why that particular letter?
Is chaf is that Rosh Hashanah for a word that has to do with either focused or spiritual? Is there a word
Not necessarily, but I would say the closest we would have is the beginning of the parsha where Rashi says that the Torah says that Sara died after 127, so it says 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, and Rashi says that she was as spiritually holy at 100 as she was at 20, and she was as beautiful at 20 as she was at 7. So if her spiritual greatness, which means is represented by what she was at the age of 20 before punishment comes, that's my best guess. But he doesn't say that. So.
Okay.
Also, the chaf is in the center, so it's noticeable.
It's near the end.
Okay.
It's not near.
No, in the word, Lifkosa.
It's kosa.
Yeah, no, it is actually the middle letter. It's a 7-letter word with a chaf at the end, in the middle. Yeah.
So math major.
You were saying? I'm sorry. You were saying? Okay. You sure? Okay. Va'od yesh lamar. I'd like to suggest another explanation. Shahakasav lo zachar habechi rishon shederach lavo machmas hateva. It says the first crying Meaning, of course, Avram cried immediately as soon as he heard. But that's a crying which came from his nature. Every time you hear something bad, or someone sees something bad happening, the eyes, that's how the body reacts or handles itself. It cries. That's not something special or meaningful for Sara. And even the crying which came from the eulogy doesn't need to be mentioned. The Beklal Masayimana. Of course, if there was a eulogy, there was crying. That's part of a eulogy. Rather, and this is a beautiful chiddush, when it says that Avram cried for Sarah, it's telling you something entirely different. And if it wouldn't be the Zera Shimshon, I don't know who else would have a right to just pull this out, but he says, even after the week was gone. Every time that Avraham would remember her deeds, her greatness, in the way she ran the house, and every time he thought of the fear of Hashem, Ein of Zolgo's Dima, she would cry again. Right. He would cry again.
He realized how much he was missing.
Right, but not just at the eulogy. He's saying that the Torah is telling Avram lispod l'Sara, v'livkosa means that he continued to cry every time he remembered her. The Torah is telling you that Avram Avinu was that person who every time that the memory would come up again, he would go back to tears.
Where do we see this from?
The Zera Shimshon says it. That's it. That's why I started with. If someone else wouldn't say it, he wouldn't say it. But that's what he's reading in the fact that the Torah says first to eulogize and then to cry, as if to say, even after the eulogies were gone, he continued to cry for her. Which is why it says lispod l'Sara v'livkosa. Why does he put her name in between the eulogy and the crying? Shohalaloma lispod v'livkos as Sara. Alavade shelispod l'Sara kvar nigmar. The eulogies for Sarah have already ended. Achiv shohalas what he was required to do. The achkach v'livkosa hu inyan acher, and crying for her was something a whole new level. V'od yesh lomar. Furthermore, I'd like to suggest, and here I'm going. Let's read it anyway. I'm going to read this a little faster because I want to get through this whole piece. It didn't have to say to eulogize Sara. It says she died in Kiryas Arba. It doesn't have to say her name. It should just say he came to eulogize her and cry for her. Because we pass in Ola Imo ve'eni yoredis. The halacha is that the a man can insist that his wife move to him towards Eretz Yisrael, but she does not have to leave. The halacha is that you can eulogize a woman for the accomplishments of her husband, meaning that if a woman accomplishes something, you can't credit it to her husband. But if a husband accomplishes something, you can credit it to his wife. So lefikach amar akasav lispod l'Sara dafka, to eulogize Sarah. She'Avram lo bala haspid l'Sara b'shvil s'hasa ishta bolvad. But Avram wasn't just coming to praise her in terms of his attributing his own accomplishments to her. She was deserving of her own praise. In other words, she had accomplished so much that he didn't need to use his accomplishments as part of the eulogy. Okay, let's skip to the next paragraph. The Gemara tells us, Kal hamorid d'maos al adam kasher, someone who cries for someone who is a good person, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sofran, Hashem counts those tears, umanichan bebeis genazav, and puts them in a special storage house. Shenamar, as it says, Nodi Safarta, Ata Simadi Masi Benodcha. And we're going to hold off with the translation for that for now. So he says the kasha hechar mizba pasig aradas demois al adam kasha. Basically, it says there that Hashem counts something. You place my tears in your. A nodi is really a jar. There's a special vessel which Hashem holds the tears, but the verse doesn't tell you what those tears are for.
And for whom?
Right. So we're going to skip to the next page. V'od yesh lomar. So he says like this: Shenodi. The first word for nodi, which means this vessel, chaser vav. Take a look at the way the verse is spelled. It's well, he doesn't give you the full spelling there, but it's spelled nun dalad yud. Heim osios din. So the vessel that Hashem contains these tears in, the word is nodi, my vessel, and then the word nodi is spelled nun dalad yud, which is the letters of din. Why? We know that, Sheshem Aleph Dalad Nun Yud. One of the names of God is Aleph, Dalad, and a Nun and a Yud. Mora al Hadin, which always suggests judgment. Even the word Adon, which means master or ruler or controller, suggests one who is. But then when you add the Yud at the end to make the Noi, so now you've got Sheken Gimel Osios Achronos Hem Osios Din. Those last three letters of that name actually reform the word Din. V'os Aleph, and then the Aleph in the front of that name, Hi Bechinas Rachmim Hamushutafim Ba'Din, is the mercy which is joined with the judgment. So we know that this world was originally supposed to be created with the attribute of judgment. But because the world couldn't survive, Hashem added the attribute of kindness, of mercy, together and joined it with the attribute of judgment. That's why the name that we use for Hashem in this world is the name Adoshem, Aleph Dalad Nun Yud, because the Dalad Nun Yud forms the word Din, and the Aleph represents the mercy. Now, why does the Aleph represent mercy? Himora Hashem Ekiyeh Shuhu Rachmim. Because one of the names which is great mercy is the name Aleph Hey Yud Hey, which appears by Yitzias Mitzrayim. That the Aleph of that name is taken and added to the word Din to make the name Adoshem. He says, but take a look. V'af be'osios din atzmam. If you look at the word judgment, din, dalad yud nun, yesh yud shehi rachmim. The yud inside is also mercy. The letter yud is a letter of mercy. Alek shi be'emtza osios dalad nun nisharetz muvlas baneim. But in the word din, the yud, the mercy is hidden between the dalad and the nun, representing judgment.
Why is Yud mercy?
Well, it's from the other names of Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei.
Okay.
It's unable to bring mercy. So the fact that Hashem uses the word din, dalad yud nun means that there is judgment in the beginning and judgment in the end, but there's mercy inside to temper that judgment. And that forms the dalad yud nun of Hashem's name. And then the aleph in the front of the name, Adoshem, really adds much more mercy. This is why we say in our davening, "Berogez rachim tiskor." Even when you're angry, remember the mercy, because in the word din is a yud representing mercy. Mahani milili Yisrael. That's of course for the Jewish people. Aval be'umos by the nations, it says, "Gam agoya shoyavodu." The people who will enslave the Jewish people, dan anochi. That's done, that's dalad nun, whenever you see that term being used for judgment, without the yud, but din gamor is complete judgment. And we only find the term dan anochi being used against the Egyptians. We don't see that being used because they were utterly wiped out without mercy, because it was done was judgment and not din.
And what is the yud? Which name of Hashem does the yud?
And the yud kei vav kei, which is of course all mercy.
So basically, my 2 cents on this is that even when I'm getting a judge, when I get a deen, even that deen, it could be severe, but still, it is a breaking point.
Yes. So the word din is a dalad and a nun. If it was just done, that would be pure judgment. Din is with a little bit of mercy.
I thought it would say Baruch Dayan Emet.
Dayan emes. Very nice. Yes. So, but the ado with the noi which is when we say God's name, there he says, Avna Mishtativ Gama Aleph. When you have an Aleph there too, Yeh Hashem Shalom, that's the full name of God. V'yeh Adar Abadin Muvla, that changes the balance to make it more judgment, more mercy than judgment. So again, done is 100, I'm making up the numbers, so please. Done is 100% judgment. Din is 2/3 judgment, 1/3 mercy. Adoshem is 2/3 mercy, 1/3 judgment.
And with the yud at the end, we can also then encompass the din with mercy in the beginning and the end. Name Hashem, Aleph Dalet Nun.
To say what?
So the Aleph Dalet Nun Yud of Hashem's name.
Right, exactly. It's the Aleph and the Yud on the two ends, and it's the Dalet and the Nun that are inside.
50-50?
Right. Well, he says, Elafishe mechza al mechza, base osias din, base osias rachmim. So technically it's 50-50, even though it's more mercy because it's on the outside versus the inside. Mishum hachi nikra dina rafia, that's why it's called a soft judgment.
Mercy tempered with judgment, it says judgment tempered with mercy.
Right. Right, very good. V'af b'misas hatzadik ein adin kama kol kach. So even when you have something as difficult as the death of a righteous person, it isn't really a full judgment. We know before every tzaddik leaves the world, there's another tzaddik born, and he uses the word kamoso, which means on the same level, which is very interesting. Furthermore, for the tzaddik, he's going to a good place. It's us who suffer.
And Rivka was born when Sara was dying.
Right? The next world is actually a better place than this world. So that's why he says the vessel which holds the tears is called Nodi Nun Dalad Yud. But Amar Akasav Nodi B'Shashata Osa Din Ba'olam Lahamis Atzadik, when you bring the judgment to take the tzaddik, Safart atasofer demasi, you count my tears. Sima demasi kolomer hayud shel demasi benodcha im nod. So take a look at the word nod. The first time it's spelled without an aleph. The second time it's spelled with an aleph. And then when you add the yud of the tears, so each of your tears, again, let me say this. The node, the vessel that Hashem uses to hold the tears, is spelled Nun Aleph Daled. And every time you drop a tear into it, the tear forms the shape of the letter Yud. Azi Hashem Adoshem Malei Ima Aleph Shal Rachmim. Every tear that falls, it forms a name of God in the upper worlds.
Those letters now rearranged are
right. Even if you don't get all the technical aspects of what we just read, and what does that mean? Names above and jars and vessels and all that. The point is, though, that the tears that are dropped for the sake of a righteous person, the tears that are let go of at a levaya, we think they're just tears, but you should know up in the upper worlds, big things are happening with every single individual tear.
The Worch, this would also emphasize, it says that at the same time, Ricky mentioned, the gates of prayer are locked except for tearful prayers. Even during our prayers, we should try to certain one come.
Right? Absolutely, and it would be the same kind of thing. Each of the tears would be bringing of mercy into the world.
Even back home, during Yom Kippur, people, really they would cry because they believe that cry really counts.
Yeah,
they believe, they would go all the eulogy in the Yom Kippur, all of those like that. He saw mainly to cry.
Did you hire women to come to the Rabbi and cry also? Not hire, but special women came to cry?
Never.
Some communities, I've heard.
No.
Have you heard of
No,
that?
the Gemara discusses that. They had special women who used to do.
Right, but that's probably why. So
Right, because the most important thing at the Levaya, or I should say one of the most important things,
So I thought, since it's an
Men,
old
yes, but not
custom.
women.
is that
Trust me, they would come and pray on
the Gemara says that they used to have women who would do special chantings and things.
Since you keep everything, I figured you still had that
No,
custom.
never heard that.
Really?
Okay,
maybe we should go on.
They bring a woman to cry in the levayot.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
said that before, right? They did that by you also, right? Did you see that? Did you say that before today? No? What do you mean? I thought we talked about what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, to bring them, to make sure professional criers.
So important. How come
I can get this.
Well, it doesn't say that Yitzchak was there,
Well, that's true. I've always wondered about that too.
right? The Zohar says he wasn't there.
He's not there. How come he's not there for his mother's funeral?
Well, he was up in heaven. Yeah, that's the Zohar. That's the Zohar. But that's a good question. But you do find that Yitzchak was inconsolable until he gets married and says "Vayinachem acharei imo." So you do find that it's just
It's true the Akedah is the same day like Yom Kippur Day.
Yeah. Well, there's the debate over it, but that's one of the opinions. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I just to repeat this is very important. This point about Yom Kippur, because I'm not saying anything about any specific communities. I'm just saying in certain communities, they actually encourage more davening and more intense davening, and the measure of the feeling of success at the end of the davening is actually how late they went, rather than how early they finished. And in such a community, I've been in shuls where they'll pick a certain part of the davening that people should emphasize, and they'll give it 10-15 minutes on Yom Kippur, and there isn't a dry eye in the whole shul. By the time that the Chazan or the Rav has recited that piyut, and everyone looks at it and studies the meaning of those things, and that's what people are looking for. And that suggests a certain type of approach in Judaism.
Just for curiosity, how many years is it between the time that Sara dies and Rivka comes?
3 years.
3 years. So how old was Rivka?
3.
3 years.
Just 3.
Yeah.
How is she carrying water?
Well,
He was very mature 3-year-old.
the prophets, I'd say prophets grow differently than do regular people.
Yeah.
So, in terms of even Moshe Rabbeinu, who the Torah tells us she opened the basket and she saw Vehine Nar Bocha, that he was mature. According to the Gemara, one opinion in the Gemara was that he had a voice of an adolescent. To which the Gemara says, no, since he's a Levi, that would make him not kosher as a Levi, because a Levi has to have a naturally developing voice, and if his voice develops, but you see that the way we are slow. A deer is born, and within minutes it's able to walk. There are animals that are able to hunt within minutes of, and we as human beings take 2 years, sometimes 3 years, sometimes 50 years to actually mature. And that's because we're slow. But if we would have that connection above, we would develop much like other animals, and that's why you find that they were able to develop much faster.
Aren't there opinions that she was like 13 though?
The question is like this. I was once. This is off the topic, but it's good to mention that. I was once in a let's call it a debate, although. And there was someone who said, all these people teaching these crazy midrashim. So I said, what's a crazy midrash? He said, that Rivka was 3 years old when she was bringing the water. I said, do you really want to pick that one? So this person said, yeah. I said, are you sure you want to pick that one? Because if that's going to be your example, then you're going to be stuck with that one. Like, yeah, I picked that one. I said, but that's actually in the Torah. It's not a medrash. Because if you say that Avram heard the news of Rivka's birth when she arrived from the Akedah, and we know that Sarah was 127 when he died, and we know that she was 90 when she had Yitzchak, so that tells us that Yitzchak was 37 at the Akedah, and it says clearly in the Torah that he was 40 when he got married. That's this week's parsha, which means the fact that Rivka was 3 years old is actually written in the Torah, and it's not a medrash. It's the people who say she was older who have to say that it wasn't that Avram heard she was born, but he heard that she had been born many years ago. But that's not the simple reading. So I said the particular medrash that you're choosing is actually a great example of what people think is crazy because they think someone made it up. It's actually written in the Torah. So I think you've made my point. I mean, that was where how the debate ended.
Shot is that she's 3 years old medrash.
That is the simple shot. Right? That's an issue. That's why I said, is that your medrash that you're picking?
But I think
her name was, they got married at 3, but maybe they waited 10 years before they,
Yeah.
had tried to have children.
Yeah, no, they didn't. Getting married doesn't mean they were living as husband and wife until it was an official marriage.
Get married when they were
But
little children.
right, they didn't live together till they were till she was 13. Okay. Now we're going to skip the next paragraph because the next paragraph is deep Kabbalistic stuff, which we just don't have time for. But v'chein hahesped, what?
Unlike the last bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm saying this is intense. I need like 15 to 20 minutes just to introduce all the concepts. But v'chein hahesped she'osem aleim. So when you eulogize for a tzaddik, sodo hu lahalos neshamas hashukas imayim legan Eden. So you should know that tzaddik, every tzaddik, when they go up to heaven, they don't just go up to heaven themselves, but they take certain souls out of Gehenna with them. And every person, even the most righteous person, has to walk through Gehenna on the way to Gan Eden. And based on who they are and certain kinds of people, they're able to take certain souls with them into Gan Eden. Exactly how that works, you have to see the holy books. So he says, the power of the tzaddik to draw those people who are in Gehenna out and take them with them to Gan Eden, it depends lefi koach haribu shel hademos, based on how much people cry for him. Kach misrabe hatikun lamala, that's how much fixing happens above. An incredible concept. When we cry below, that means we are increasing our appreciation of the loss and how great the tzaddik was. And because we have such a amazing perspective of the tzaddik, that allows the tzaddik to then make a claim in the upper world for certain souls. And that's why it says Hashem counts the tears. Because those tears are what fix the world above. Okay, now again, I'm going to not explain all these concepts. We don't have time. We know before Hashem made this world, there were certain worlds which were created and destroyed. Besod ha'ayin, which is associated with the eye. Let's move on from that. That's why we say, Pekachi necha re'esham masenu, open your eyes and see our desolation. That's why it's specifically tears which are appropriate at the destruction of this world. Because the tzaddik is who holds the world up. That it's specifically, that's why tears come from the eye, because the eye which represents the worlds as they stand. Again, whatever all these terms mean, we should be able to look past that and to recognize that the point that he's trying to make, based off the pasuk Lispot l'Sara v'livkosa, is that the tears that we cry are very, very powerful. And I'd like to get in one more small piece. So I'm going to move on. I just want to say that it says in the Sefer Reishis Chachma that when a person does teshuvah and they cry from teshuvah, you're supposed to take those tears in your hand and wipe them across your forehead. Because the tears for teshuvah will erase the markings of the sin from the person's forehead. You go into a certain tzaddik, many people used to go to a tzaddik, they used to go in and stand the whole time like this, or they used to put their hat down because they knew that tzaddik could read on the forehead, could read the person's sins. But there's a simpler way. Do teshuvah, take the tears, wipe it across the forehead, and the sins are gone. How exactly does this work? I don't know, but the tears are very powerful tears, and all the different points that he makes, specifically, the fact that it's through the tears that the tzaddik elevates those souls, or as he said before, the tears that we cry for that person allow that person to enter through the gates of tears. Tears are a very big deal, and that's why the focus of the Levaya and the Hesped should always be on making people cry, not making people laugh. And sometimes making people laugh actually makes people cry, meaning sometimes that has to be part of it in order to jolt our emotions and to make us feel more, which is also okay. But as long as the ultimate point should be a spiritual kind of eulogy, not a physical. Just quickly, I want to get this in on page Reish Mem Ches.
There's a Moshe Yehuda speaking to Yosef, when he's trying to convince me, he says, if I drop one tear, I'm going to destroy this entire city. You know.
Right. And there's a discussion about Esav's tears.
Right.
But on page Reish Mem Ches, all the way on the right, I think this is such a simple point, but very, very powerful. Why is there so much discussion about Avram's camels? The camels were muzzled. There were 10 camels. There were this. Camels. I mean, we spend enough time with Eliezer. We have, because even the servants of our forefathers, whatever. What's with the whole discussion on the camels? So he says, "V'kodim tzeisenu mi'a'inyan hazeh." So before, all the way on Reish Mem Ches, the top paragraph on the right, Yesh lasses tuv tam v'das. I'd like to give a good explanation. Lama Eliezer asa asiman b'hanara asher toma lahashkos afa gemalim. Why does he have to use the camels as part of the siman? The Isa b'medrash Rabbi k'moshepirish b'almatnas kahuna. So, again, the question is, why are the camels part of the story? If she would give him to drink, if she would run to give him to drink, if she would go get him a second filling, there were people with her, with him. Why didn't you say, I'll give it for your people as well? What's with the camels? So he says, there's an opinion in the Gemara that says, that Gemalim shel Avraham lo haya lahem zamam klal. That they didn't actually have muzzles, but rather when it says they were naturally muzzled. Meaning the animals were under control. Because they naturally didn't eat of the fields of others. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, like the famous story of the donkey of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair had his donkey stolen, and the animal wouldn't eat. So the thieves brought it back to Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. They said, your animal won't eat. He said, did you guys tithe the produce before you fed it to him? But, of course he's not going to eat, because he doesn't eat anything that doesn't have a hamish hechsher. That's the... So Avram Avinu was no less, and so his animals were naturally muzzled. V'amar ha'eved ba'atzmo. So says the slave, the servant, Eliezer, nothing bad can happen through the animals of the righteous people. You know what's a better gauge than anything I can figure out? The camels won't eat of anyone else's field. So if this isn't the wife fitting for Yitzchak, the camels won't drink her water. Unbelievable explanation. It's not he who's doing the test. He's saying, I know nothing. The camels of Avram know better than me. Who would be a fitting wife for Yitzchak? That's why, look at what it says. It doesn't say, as soon as she said, I'll give for your camels, he gave her the... He says, "Vayhi kashakilu agamalim lishtos." When the camels drank,
actually,
wow.
Then it says, "Vayhi kachayish nazem zav." He took the golden ring. Shevada betuach shetia isha oganas la. There'd be what a beautiful explanation. He said, "Give it to me." So it was a double test. Give it to me, then she'd give it to the camels. And the whole thing, he was really watching to see if the camels would drink. When the camels they drank, that was a sign for him that she is in fact the proper wife for Yitzchak. What an original pshat, a beautiful pshat, and fits right there in the verse where it says, and when the camels finished drinking, that's when he knew that this was the right wife.
Is this the Shimshon bringing this down?
Yeah.